American empire is in decline because it's no longer the spirit of industrial capitalism that made the country rich in the first place. The first thing that I wrote my dissertation on the American School of Protectionists, the American School of Economics, and it was protectionist. It saw the state as protecting the development of industrial capitalism, and especially preventing England and English finance from taking over the country. The American decline has been a series of processes. One of the great derailing of American progress occurred in 1913 with the Federal Reserve creation. The big bankers, J.P. Morgan, got all the big bankers together and said, we've got to prevent the U.S. government from playing a role in the economy. We've got to take over what the U.S. Treasury was doing and create it in the hands of private bankers without any government officials. And that was what the Federal Reserve was. So the Federal Reserve was created to essentially, with 12 districts, just like the Treasury had 12 district banks, but all of the decision-making was taking away out of Washington to the financial centers, to New York primarily, which was sort of where the Federal Reserve intervened in markets, Boston, Philadelphia, Chicago, where the commodities exchange was, San Francisco, where the gold was being produced. Instead of the government steering finance into the financing of industry, the Federal Reserve steered finance into making money at the expense of industry. And initially, right after 1913, you had World War I. And then you had the financial sector insisting on the repayment of foreign inter-allied debts, and that led to the Depression because the Allies said, well, now that America wants us to pay for the cost of the arms that it sold us going into war, we'll make Germany pay the reparations. And it all became a tangle where England, France, Germany were all reduced to depression. So you had a kind of American that empowered America that ended up as fascism began to develop in the 1930s. Europeans sent their gold to the United States for safekeeping, and by 1945, the United States had so much gold that it was able to determine, first of all, to get English support of a very U.S.-centered system, saying other countries cannot create their own currency. Other countries cannot create their own money and plan the economies. Whoever has the gold or who has the U.S. dollars will be in charge of planning the post-war world. So the United States, by being very self-centered financially, created an emphasis on the financial worldview and finance capitalism that became more and more predatory in character. And so especially after 1980s, when you had the beginning of corporate takeovers, of debt-financed takeovers and junk bonding, and the whole idea of not only junk bonding, but the idea that fortunes were to be made by debt leveraging, by borrowing money to buy assets that the Federal Reserve would then lend money to the banks to bid up the price of real estate companies, and the price of a home or real estate is whatever banks would lend. And so the Federal Reserve and the Fannie Mae and the other government real estate agencies made a completely different world from what seemed to be a promise of American prosperity in 1945. Even in the 1960s, when I was growing up and buying a house, there were rules that all the banks had for lending mortgages. As long as you were white, they wouldn't lend them to blacks, but as long as you were white, you needed to make a down payment of maybe 20%. You'd get a 30-year mortgage But the rule that the banks had was, we're going to give you a mortgage, but it has to be within your ability to pay 25% of your income. Well, if a bank will only lend you money, enough mortgage money to buy a house, limited to 25% of your income, that means that you're not going to be able to outbid other buyers who, let's say, have the terms that banks lend today. Now, Fannie Mae will government guarantee bank loans for 43% of your income. Well, if American labor has to pay 43% of its income instead of 25% of its income, and if the mortgages aren't 30 years, but they're very short, much shorter, then you're going to have employers having to pay workers enough to live in a house. And I know more and more workers are now living in their car, but the idea was a worker should have a house, not have to live in the car or be homeless. And the result is that the financialization of real estate, of corporations, stocks and bonds, began to price America out of the market. So as American wages were bid up by the cost of living, by privatizing health care, by privatizing education, there's no way that American labor today can make a living wage and compete with the labor, Asian labor, labor anywhere else in the world. So the corporation said, well, we can't afford American labor anymore. Let's invite China, and that's in 1998. I guess Clinton invited China into the World Trade Organization. The Americans decided, let's have foreign labor. So America shifted all of its industry outside of the United States, saying industry doesn't make fortunes anymore. Fortunes are made by deindustrializing the country. Let's shift the industry abroad, and we'll just make money in predatory ways. We'll make money from, we'll have American banks go to China, and we'll make the money to the banks, and the banks will make all of the profits, the interest rates that it gets from inflating Chinese prices. We'll buy up a Chinese industry. We'll get the profits from Chinese industry, and we'll make the monopolies and move all the money here. Well, much to their surprise, China didn't let them do that. It was not like Germany or like England or other countries. They actually were acting in their own self-interest, and the result is that you have China's economy growing much more. Well, one of the problems with limiting the Americans from understanding that America was losing its place in the world was comparing GDP. Well, look at how much our GDP is growing compared to other countries. But as we discussed earlier in this talk, what is GDP? You think of it as gross national product, but the gross national product includes all of the interest rates that banks charge. All of the penalty charges are called providing economics financial services. That's what it is in the national income and product accounts. They include monopoly rents. That's all part of the profits. There's no distinction between monopoly rent and profit. The homeowners' estimate of what they would have to pay for their house if they had to rent their house. That's included in as a product in GDP. So much of the GDP isn't a product. And if the Americans had not only their self-celebrating GDP accounts showing that America's rent seekers, the rentiers, are most of the GDP, and most of this growth in American income is all for the 1%, not for the 99%, then they'd realize, wait a minute, if you compare our real GDP, the production GDP, with what China's real production GDP, you think it's not like just America a little bit behind. It's like this. It's like America's not producing anything anymore, that all we are is a parasite on the rest of the world. Well, the rest of the world, no other country is trying to produce a rent-free GDP. But if they were doing that, they'd realize what their advantage is, and they'd realize how they can break free of this anti-classical economics. I call it, it's really anti-classical as much as anti-Marxism. And not only against Marxism, it's the whole idea that there is such a thing as unearned income, the whole idea of classical idea of free markets. Well, then you'd see that America is actually has what Marx would call a false consciousness. It's a belief that you're doing fine when you're not doing fine at all. It's like the belief by the military-industrial complex that we're making such wonderful armaments, tanks and aircraft, that we spend so much more than Russia spends on it, that we must be superior because we spend more. Right. Whereas the American arms don't work. They're not arms for fighting. They're arms for making profits from the government. They're not. It's like wine. We said before. It's not like making wine to be drunk. It's wine drunk. It's wine to be traded. Yeah. Well, that's what the arms are. So the Americans don't have a way of estimating what their position in the world is relative to other countries, and they don't realize how, while they thought that they were getting a stronger and stronger economy, they were actually getting a more rent-ravaged economy, an economy that is polarized between the upper 1% that doesn't make its money by building factories and introducing new technology and increasing productivity, but just makes its money by essentially disassembling, deindustrializing the economy, and that's this self-destructive character in the American economy has been a major factor.